The midnight knock wasn't supposed to change anything, but when Victoria Hale, the untouchable CEO who barely acknowledged his existence, appeared at Liam Carter's door on Christmas Eve, trembling and vulnerable, everything he thought he knew about power, loneliness, and second chances shattered in an instant. Some nights refuse to stay forgotten, no matter how hard you try to pretend they never happened. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. And if it moves you, hit that like button. Now let me tell you about the night that changed two lives forever. The apartment was too quiet. Liam Carter had grown accustomed to silence over the past 3 years, but Christmas Eve silence hit different. It pressed against his ears like water, thick and suffocating, reminding him of everything that used to fill this space. Laughter, cartoons playing too loud, Sophie's voice calling him daddy, in that way that made the word sound like music. Tonight, though, his 6-year-old daughter was with his sister across town, wrapped in the chaos of cousins and Christmas cookies. The kind of holiday magic Liam couldn't quite manufacture on his own anymore. He'd dropped her off that afternoon with her overnight bag and her favorite stuffed rabbit, watched her run inside without looking back, and felt that familiar ache settle into his chest like an old injury that never quite healed. He told himself it was good for her, normal. She needed more than what he could provide in this cramped 2-bedroom apartment with its peeling wallpaper and appliances that only worked when they felt like it. The truth was simpler and harder. He was tired. 32 felt ancient some days, the kind of tired that sleep didn't fix, that coffee couldn't touch. The tired that came from being perpetually behind on bills, behind on laundry, behind on being the father Sophie deserved, behind on being the man he used to be, before cancer took Rachel and left him holding together a life that kept threatening to fall apart. Liam sat on the couch that sagged in the middle, nursing a beer that had gone warm in his hand. The television flickered with some movie he wasn't watching. White Christmas, maybe. Something black and white with people who sang their problems away. Outside, the city hummed with that particular brand of holiday cheer that only highlighted how separate he felt from all of it. His phone sat dark on the coffee table. No messages, no calls. Everyone was exactly where they were supposed to be, doing exactly what they were supposed to do on Christmas Eve. Everyone except him. The knock came at 12:17 a.m. Liam's first thought was that he'd imagined it. Late-night silence did that sometimes, made you hear things that weren't there. Footsteps in empty hallways, voices in static, knocks on doors when everyone you knew was asleep. But then it came again. 3 sharp raps, urgent but controlled. He set down the beer and stood, his body moving on autopilot while his brain tried to catch up. Who the hell knocked on doors at midnight on Christmas? Had something happened to Sophie? His sister would have called. Unless... Liam pulled open the door without checking the peephole, his heart already racing with catastrophic possibilities. Victoria Hale stood in his doorway. For a moment, Liam's brain simply refused to process what his eyes were seeing. It was like finding a lion in your bathtub or a helicopter on your fire escape, so fundamentally wrong that reality itself seemed to glitch. Victoria Hale, CEO of Meridian Enterprises, the woman whose calendar he managed, whose coffee he fetched, whose entire professional existence he facilitated from a carefully maintained distance of exactly 3 steps behind. The woman who spoke to him maybe twice a week, usually to correct something or request something, her voice always carrying that particular tone of someone addressing necessary but forgettable infrastructure. She stood in his doorway wearing a black coat that probably cost more than his car, her dark hair slightly disheveled, her usually immaculate makeup smudged at the edges. Her eyes, those sharp, calculating eyes that could dissect a quarterly report at 20 paces, looked different, uncertain, almost frightened. "Mr. Carter," her voice came out rough, like she'd been running or crying. "I apologize for the intrusion. I realize the hour is—" "Hale," Liam heard himself say, his voice pitched slightly higher than normal. "Is everything— what are you doing here?" It was possibly the stupidest question he'd ever asked, but his brain was still several seconds behind the moment, trying to reconcile the woman who inhabited the top floor of a downtown high-rise with the woman currently standing in the hallway of his low-rent apartment building. Victoria glanced over her shoulder, a quick, nervous gesture that sent another jolt of wrongness through Liam's chest. Victoria Hale didn't do nervous. She did commanding, decisive, occasionally terrifying, never nervous. "May I come in?" she asked, and there it was again, that fracture in the armor he'd only ever seen polished to perfection. Liam stepped back before his conscious mind agreed to it, his body responding to something in her voice that bypassed all the appropriate questions he should have been asking, like why his boss was at his apartment at midnight, or how she even knew where he lived. Victoria stepped inside, and Liam closed the door behind her, suddenly hyper-aware of every inadequacy in his living space. The furniture was second-hand. The carpet had stains he'd stopped trying to remove. Sophie's toys were scattered in the corner despite his half-hearted attempt to tidy up before she left. The whole place probably smelled like the Chinese takeout he'd eaten for dinner, straight from the container because washing dishes felt like too much effort. This was where he lived, where he survived. And now Victoria Hale was standing in the middle of it, looking around with an expression he couldn't quite read. "I apologize," she said again, and her voice was steadier now, like she was gathering herself. "This is inappropriate. I shouldn't have come here." But she made no move toward the door. Liam cleared his throat, scrambling for something approximating professional behavior. Did something happen? With work? I can call security if there's—" "No." Victoria cut him off, then seemed to catch herself. "No, nothing like that. She paused, and for a moment she looked lost. This woman who commanded boardrooms and intimidated investors, and never seemed to second-guess a single decision. There was a car. A car? "Following me." She said it matter-of-factly, but her hands were clenched at her sides. "From the office. I was working late. Of course she was. And when I left, I noticed headlights behind me. They followed me through 4 turns. 5. I tried to lose them, but they stayed back just far enough to maintain distance." Liam's apartment suddenly felt smaller, the walls pressing in. "Did you call the police? And tell them what? That someone was driving behind me on public roads?" Victoria shook her head, a bitter smile flickering across her face. "I'm not even certain it was intentional. Perhaps I'm paranoid. Perhaps it was nothing." "But you don't think it was nothing?" Her eyes met his, and Liam saw something there he'd never seen before. Genuine fear, barely controlled. "No, I don't think it was nothing." The silence that followed was thick with questions Liam didn't know how to ask. Why here? Why him? Why not home, or a hotel, or literally anywhere else that made more sense than the cramped apartment of her administrative assistant? Victoria seemed to read his thoughts. She looked away toward the darkened window that faced the street. "I didn't know where else to go. I realize how that sounds. You must think I'm losing my mind." "I don't think that," Liam said, and was surprised to find it was true. There was something about the raw edges of her fear that felt real in a way her polished office persona never had. "Here, sit down. Do you want some water? Coffee?" "Water would be fine, thank you." Liam moved to the kitchen, grateful for the excuse to put some distance between them, to let his thoughts catch up to this surreal situation. He filled a glass from the tap. He didn't have anything fancier, and tried to organize his spinning thoughts into something coherent. Victoria Hale was in his apartment on Christmas Eve because someone might have been following her, and she'd come here, to him, instead of anywhere else. When he returned to the living room, Victoria had taken off her coat and draped it over the arm of the couch. Underneath, she wore what she'd probably been wearing at the office, dark slacks and a silk blouse that looked effortlessly expensive. She stood by the window now, careful to stay to the side, not silhouetted against the light. "Here," Liam said, offering the glass. Her fingers brushed his as she took it, and he was startled by how cold her hands were. She took a small sip, then held the glass like an anchor. "Thank you," Victoria said, "for not asking the questions I can tell you're trying not to ask." Liam almost laughed. "I have about 50 questions." "I'm sure you do." She took another sip, buying time. "The address was in your employee file. I accessed it from my phone. That probably violates several company policies regarding privacy." "Probably," Liam agreed. "Though I think showing up at my apartment at midnight already crossed that line." To his surprise, Victoria smiled. It was small and fleeting, but it was real. "Fair point." She moved away from the window and sat on the couch, perching on the edge like she might need to run at any moment. Liam took the chair across from her, maintaining that professional distance, even though the entire situation had shattered any pretense of normal workplace boundaries. "How long were you at the office?" Liam asked, because it was easier than the bigger questions. "I'm not sure. I lost track of time." Victoria set the glass on the coffee table next to Liam's abandoned beer. "There's a merger we're finalizing. Japanese firm. The time difference means most of the calls happen late. I finished the last one around 11 and decided to head home. On Christmas Eve. Work doesn't stop for holidays, Mr. Carter." "Liam," he said, "I think we're past Mr. Carter at this point." Something shifted in her expression, a softening, maybe, or just exhaustion finally showing through. "Liam, then. And you can call me Victoria, under the circumstances." Victoria. The name felt strange in his mouth, too personal, too intimate for the woman who signed his paychecks. "Did you see anyone else at the office? Security would have logs of who was in the building. I passed Thomas on my way out. He's night security, former police officer, I believe. Very thorough with the logs." Victoria rubbed her temples, and Liam noticed for the first time how tired she looked. Not just tonight, tired, but the kind of deep exhaustion that came from running on empty for too long. "The car, it was a dark sedan, black or navy. I couldn't see the plates. It stayed 3 or 4 car lengths back, matched my speed exactly. When I turned, it turned. When I accelerated, it accelerated." "And you lost them?" "I think so. I took several unnecessary turns through downtown, doubled back twice. Eventually the headlights disappeared. But She stopped, pressing her lips together like she was physically holding back words. "I didn't want to go home. Not immediately. Not if there was even a chance they followed me that far." Liam leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You think someone's targeting you specifically?" "I don't know." Victoria's voice was quiet now, almost vulnerable. "We've had protests at the office. Environmental activists upset about a factory we're not even directly involved with. I've received angry emails. Most CEOs do. It comes with the position. But this felt different." "Different how?" "Deliberate. Patient." She looked at him, and in that moment she wasn't his boss or a CEO or anyone with power. She was just a woman who was scared and alone and didn't know who else to turn to. Like someone who knew exactly what they were doing. The implication hung in the air between them. Professional stalking, someone with resources, someone willing to wait. "Why didn't you call your security detail?" Liam asked. "I know you have one." Victoria's expression shuddered. "I dismissed them after 8. I didn't want them hovering all night while I worked, and I certainly wasn't going to call them after the fact and admit I might have put myself at risk through my own stubbornness." "That's stupid?" "Yes, I'm aware." She said it sharply, defensive, that familiar ice returning to her voice. "You don't need to lecture me about security protocols. I've heard them all from Edward." Edward Chen, head of corporate security and, from what Liam understood, one of the few people who could actually push back against Victoria when she dug her heels in. "I wasn't going to say stupid," Liam said carefully. "I was going to say human. Everyone thinks they're fine until they're not." Victoria stared at him, and he watched her defenses flicker, up, down, uncertain. "Is that what happened to you?" The question caught him off guard. "What do you mean?" "You weren't always an administrative assistant." It wasn't quite a question. "Your resume. I remember reading it when HR recommended you. Engineering degree, 3 years at a major firm, then a gap, and then you applied for a position significantly below your qualifications. I've always wondered what happened in that gap." Liam felt something twist in his chest. He'd known, intellectually, that Victoria had seen his resume. She signed off on all senior hires, even administrative ones. But hearing her say it out loud, acknowledging that she knew he'd taken a massive step backward, felt uncomfortably exposing. "My wife got sick," he heard himself say. "Cancer. Aggressive. By the time they found it, there wasn't much they could do except try to buy time. I quit my job to take care of her. And Sophie, our daughter, she was 3. "Sophie," Victoria's voice softened on the name. "The girl in the photo on your desk." "Yeah." Liam glanced toward the hallway where Sophie's bedroom door stood slightly ajar. "She's 6 now, staying with my sister tonight. They do Christmas Eve together. Bigger family, more excitement. Better than I can give her here. I'm sorry, Victoria said, and it sounded genuine. About your wife. Rachel. Liam didn't know why he offered the name. Maybe because Victoria had shared her fear and it felt only fair to share his grief. She died 2 years ago. By then, I'd been out of engineering for so long that nobody wanted to hire me. Too much gap in the resume, too many questions about whether I still had the skills. So I took what I could get. Administrative work. Something with regular hours that let me be there for Sophie. That's why you never stay late. That's why I never stay late. Liam met her eyes. I pick her up from daycare at 5:30. We have dinner together. I help with homework even though she mostly just colors at this point. I read her stories until she falls asleep. It's not much. It's not the life I planned, but it's what we have. Victoria was quiet for a long moment, her gaze distant. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Do you regret it? Stepping away from your career? Every single day, Liam admitted, and not at all, depending on when you ask me. A sound from outside made them both freeze, a car engine, close and then fading. Victoria's hand moved to her phone, her entire body tensing. Liam stood and moved to the window, careful to stay out of direct line of sight. The street below was mostly empty, a few parked cars, one driving past slowly, taillights disappearing around the corner. Nothing that screamed danger, but nothing that felt entirely safe either. I don't see anything, he said, but he didn't move away from the window. I'm being paranoid, Victoria said, but she didn't sound convinced. This is ridiculous. I should go. I've imposed enough, and you have… Stay. The word came out before Liam could think better of it. Victoria looked at him, surprise flickering across her face. Just for a bit, Liam continued, his voice steadier now. Until you're sure nobody followed you here, have some coffee, catch your breath. You don't have to go back out there if you don't feel safe. I don't want to be a burden. You're not. And Liam realized, as he said it, that it was true. There was something about having someone else in the apartment that made the silence less oppressive, the night less endless. Even if that someone was his boss, who he barely knew, who existed in a completely different world than his. Besides, if you leave now and something happens, I'll feel responsible. And I don't need that kind of guilt on top of everything else. Victoria almost smiled. Emotionally manipulative, Mr. Liam. Whatever works. She studied him for another moment, then nodded slowly. Coffee then, if you're sure. I'm sure. Liam moved back to the kitchen, acutely aware of Victoria's eyes following him. The coffee maker was cheap and loud, but it worked. He measured out grounds, the good stuff he saved for mornings when he needed extra fortification, and tried to ignore the surreal nature of making coffee for Victoria Hale in his cramped kitchen at nearly 1 a.m. Your daughter, Victoria said from the living room. Sophie, what's she like? Liam smiled despite himself. Loud, fearless, too smart for her own good. She asks about 500 questions a day, most of which I don't know how to answer. Why is the sky blue? Where do thoughts come from? Can you die from eating too much ice cream? Can you? I told her we'd have to test that theory very carefully. He heard Victoria laugh, a real laugh, soft but genuine. The sound of it was startling. Liam had worked for her for 18 months and couldn't remember ever hearing her laugh. Rachel was better at the questions, Liam continued, pouring water into the machine. She had this way of taking Sophie seriously, even when the questions were absurd. She'd sit down and actually think about it, give these thoughtful answers that somehow made sense. I just make stuff up and hope Sophie doesn't call me on it later. I'm sure you're better at it than you think. Maybe. The coffee maker gurgled to life, filling the apartment with its familiar sound. Mostly I'm just trying not to screw her up too badly. That's the goal. Set the bar low enough that I might actually clear it. That's the goal for all of us, Victoria said quietly. Liam turned to look at her. She'd leaned back against the couch now, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. Without the fear sharpening her features, she looked younger, still beautiful in that severe, untouchable way, but also tired in a way that seemed to go deeper than one late night at the office. Do you have kids? Liam asked, then immediately regretted it. Too personal, too much like prying into a life he had no business knowing about. But Victoria didn't seem offended. No children, no husband, No real relationships that lasted longer than a few months before work got in the way. She said it matter-of-factly, but there was something underneath, not quite regret, but maybe its quieter cousin. Recognition of a path not taken. I always told myself there would be time later, after the next promotion, after the company stabilized, after I proved whatever it was I thought I needed to prove. And now I'm 43 years old, sitting in my assistant's apartment on Christmas Eve because I didn't know where else to go. She looked at him, and there was something raw in her expression that made Liam's chest tight. So I suppose the answer is that there never was going to be time later. There was only ever the choice I made over and over without quite realizing I was making it. The coffee finished brewing. Liam poured 2 cups, adding cream to his because that's how he took it, leaving Victoria's black because he didn't know her preferences, and black seemed safest. He brought them back to the living room, handed her one, and sat back down in the chair. "Thank you," Victoria said, wrapping both hands around the mug like she was cold despite the apartment's stuffy heating. She took a sip, closed her eyes briefly. "This is good. It's just coffee. It's just coffee that someone made for me without me having to ask or demand or schedule it into a meeting agenda." She opened her eyes. "You'd be surprised how rare that is." Liam didn't know what to say to that. He sipped his own coffee and tried to imagine what Victoria's life actually looked like beyond the glimpses he saw at work. The corner office with its view of the city. The meetings that ran back to back from 7 in the morning until whenever she finally left. The constant pressure of decisions that affected hundreds of employees, millions of dollars, the kind of responsibility that never really turned off. "Can I ask you something?" Victoria said, breaking the silence. "Sure." "Why did you take this job, with me specifically? You could have found administrative work anywhere, probably positions that paid better, required less." Liam considered the question, turning his coffee mug in his hands. "Honestly, the benefits package. Meridian has the best health insurance I could find. Sophie has some respiratory issues from when she was born premature. Nothing life-threatening, but she needs regular checkups, sometimes medications. The insurance I had after Rachel died was garbage. High deductible. Didn't cover half of what Sophie needed. When I saw Meridian's package, it was a no-brainer." "You took the job for health insurance." "I took the job because I needed to keep my daughter healthy, and this was the best option available." Liam met her eyes. "That probably sounds mercenary." "No." Victoria shook her head slowly. "It sounds like being a parent, like making the practical choice even when it costs you something else. I respect that more than you know." "What about you?" Liam heard himself ask. "Why do you do it? The 80-hour weeks, the constant pressure. You're the CEO. You could probably ease back if you wanted to." Victoria smiled, but it was sad. "You'd think so, wouldn't you? But there's always another crisis. Another deal that will fall apart without my personal attention. Another board member who needs reassuring that I'm still the right person for this position. Being at the top doesn't mean you get to relax. It means everyone's watching, waiting for you to slip, ready to question whether you deserve to be there at all." Sounds exhausting. "It is." She took another sip of coffee. "But it's also who I am, or who I've become. I'm not sure I know how to be anything else anymore." The honesty in her voice caught Liam off guard. This wasn't the Victoria Hale who barked orders and expected immediate compliance. This was someone else, someone vulnerable and uncertain and maybe a little bit lost. "I used to think that too," Liam said carefully, "after Rachel died. I thought I was just Sophie's dad and the guy who used to be an engineer. Like I'd been reduced down to the bare minimum of myself and there wasn't anything else left." "What changed?" "Nothing changed." Liam shrugged. "I just stopped fighting it. Stopped pretending I was going to wake up one day and be the person I was before. This is who I am now. Maybe it's smaller than what I used to be. Maybe it's not. But it's real, and it's mine. And most days that's enough." Victoria was quiet, staring into her coffee like it held answers. When she finally spoke, her voice was almost too quiet to hear. "I don't know if I have anything that's mine anymore. Everything is the company, the strategy, the bottom line. Even this apartment." She gestured vaguely. "Coming here was calculated. I ran through my options and decided you were the safest bet. Someone who works for me but isn't part of my executive team. Someone who wouldn't ask too many questions or use this as leverage later." "That's pretty cynical." That's reality. But she didn't sound defensive now, just tired. When you're responsible for as many people as I am, you learn to calculate, to weigh options, to never make a decision that's just about what you want. Is that why you're here? Liam asked. Really? Because I was the safest calculated option? Victoria looked up, meeting his eyes, and for a long moment she didn't answer. Then, so quietly he almost missed it, she said, "No, I came here because I was terrified, and I didn't want to be alone." The admission hung in the air between them, raw and undefended. Liam felt something shift in his chest, some wall he didn't know he'd been maintaining crumbling just a little. "I get that," he said, "being alone." "Do you?" "Every single night." Liam set down his coffee mug. "Sophie falls asleep by 8. After that, it's just me and whatever noise I can generate to fill the silence. TV shows I don't really watch, music I don't really hear, anything to avoid sitting with how quiet it gets." "I never thought—" Victoria stopped, shook her head. "I suppose I assumed you had family, friends, a support system." "I have my sister, some old college buddies I text occasionally, but real connection? The kind where someone actually knows you?" Liam laughed, but there was no humor in it. "That died with Rachel. Everyone else just knows the version of me I show them. The functional version. The one who's holding it together." "And are you? Holding it together?" "Most days. Some days. Tonight?" He met her eyes. "Tonight I was sitting here drinking warm beer and watching a movie I've seen 50 times because it was easier than thinking about how I used to spend Christmas Eve before everything fell apart. So maybe not holding it together so much as just existing, waiting for tomorrow to come so I can pick up Sophie and pretend I'm fine." Victoria set down her own mug, and when she spoke, her voice was rough. "I spent Christmas Eve at the office because I couldn't face going home to an empty penthouse where nobody was waiting for me. I tell myself it's dedication, work ethic. But the truth is, it's easier to be busy than to sit with how alone I actually am." The confession settled between them, heavy and honest. Outside, the city continued its muted Christmas Eve celebration, distant sirens, the occasional car, the ambient noise of millions of lives happening simultaneously. Inside, the apartment felt smaller and larger at the same time, like it had expanded to hold this conversation they were having, this unexpected sharing of truths neither of them had planned to speak aloud. "We're quite a pair," Liam said finally. Victoria almost smiled. "Aren't we just—" Another sound from outside made them both tense, louder this time, closer. Car doors slamming, voices. Victoria's hand moved to her phone again, her entire body coiling with renewed fear. Liam was at the window before he consciously decided to move. He peered out carefully, scanning the street below. There, a dark sedan parked 2 buildings down, 2 figures standing beside it, faces obscured by shadow. They weren't moving toward the building, weren't obviously threatening, but they were there, which was 2 more people than should be on this quiet street at 1 in the morning. "Is it them?" Victoria asked, and her voice was tight with barely controlled panic. "I don't know. Maybe. There's a car. What kind?" "Dark. Sedan. I can't see the plates from here." Victoria was beside him in an instant, pressed against the wall beside the window. She risked a quick glance down, then pulled back, her face pale. "That's the same car. Same model. I'm sure of it." "You can't be sure from this distance. I'm sure." Her voice was flat, absolute. "They followed me here. After everything I did to lose them, they still—" Okay, listen to me." Liam turned to face her, keeping his voice calm even though his heart was hammering. "We're going to call the police. Give them the plate number if we can get it. They'll check it out, see if there's a reason for them to be here. And if there isn't, if they claim they were just parking, you can't arrest someone for being on a public street." She was right, and they both knew it. The car could leave before police arrived, come back later. This could be nothing, paranoia and coincidence, or it could be the beginning of something worse. "Then we wait," Liam said. "See what they do. If they approach the building, we call 911 immediately. If they just sit there, we figure it out." Victoria nodded, but her hands were shaking. Liam noticed for the first time that she'd wrapped her arms around herself, holding on like she might fly apart otherwise. Without thinking, he reached out and touched her shoulder. Hey, you're safe here, I promise. Nothing's going to happen. You can't promise that. No, Liam admitted, but I can promise I'm not going to let you deal with it alone. Victoria looked at him, and something in her expression cracked. Not broke. Cracked, like ice on a frozen lake, showing the dark water beneath. Why are you being kind to me? The question was so unexpected that Liam almost laughed. Why wouldn't I be? Because I've been terrible to you. For 18 months I've treated you like furniture. Something useful but not worth noticing. I don't think I've ever asked you a single personal question before tonight. I didn't even know your wife's name. Rachel, Liam said again, and this time it felt less like offering a name and more like offering a piece of himself. Rachel. Victoria repeated it softly, like she was committing it to memory. I'm sorry. For not asking sooner. For being the kind of boss who doesn't even see the people who keep her life running. You're not. I am. She cut him off, but gently. I am exactly that. And you still opened your door to me, still made me coffee, still promised I was safe when I showed up here scared out of my mind. That's either incredibly kind or incredibly stupid. Maybe both. This time Victoria did smile, small and genuine. Thank you for both then. They stood there for a moment, close together by the window, watching the street below. The two figures had gotten back in the car but hadn't started the engine. Just sitting there, waiting. Tell me something, Victoria said quietly. Something that has nothing to do with work or fear or any of this. Something real. Liam thought for a moment. Sophie learned to ride a bike last month, without training wheels. I'd been putting it off because I was scared she'd get hurt, but my sister convinced me to just go for it. We went to the park on a Saturday afternoon and I ran beside her holding the seat, and then at some point I let go without telling her and she just kept riding, didn't even realize I wasn't holding on anymore. That must have been wonderful. It was terrifying. All I could think about was, what if she fell? What if she got hurt? What if I'd made the wrong call, pushing her before she was ready? But then she looked back and realized she was doing it on her own, and her face. Liam stopped, his throat tight. She was so proud of herself, so happy. And I thought, this is it. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. Letting her go little by little, even when it scares me, so she can figure out she's stronger than she thinks. You're a good father, Victoria said. I'm a terrified father who's making it up as I goes and hoping I don't ruin her. That's what a good father is. Victoria's voice was soft. Someone who cares enough to be scared. Someone who shows up anyway. Below, the car's engine finally turned over. Headlights flicked on. Liam and Victoria both tensed, watching as the sedan pulled away from the curb and disappeared around the corner. They waited in silence, counting seconds, waiting for the car to circle back. 1 minute, 2, 5. Nothing. Victoria let out a breath she'd been holding. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe I really am just paranoid. Or maybe they were checking to see if you'd stopped here and decided to come back later. Or maybe it's coincidence. Liam stepped back from the window. Either way, they're gone for now. Victoria nodded, but she didn't look relieved. She looked exhausted, like the adrenaline that had been holding her together was finally draining away, leaving only the weight she'd been carrying. You should sit, Liam said. You look like you're about to fall over. I'm fine. You're not. Neither am I. We're both running on fumes pretending to be functional human beings. So sit. Finish your coffee. We'll figure out the rest as we go. Victoria seemed like she wanted to argue, but instead she just nodded and moved back to the couch. This time she didn't perch on the edge. She sank into it, letting herself actually rest, and Liam saw her eyes close briefly. He sat back down in his chair, picking up his own coffee even though it had gone lukewarm. The silence that settled over them now wasn't the suffocating kind from earlier. It was different, quieter, maybe, but less empty. Like the apartment had expanded to hold both of them and their respective exhaustions. Can I ask you something? Victoria said after a while. Sure. Do you ever wish you could go back? To before everything changed? Before... She gestured vaguely, encompassing loss and grief and all the ways life didn't turn out how you planned. Liam considered the question carefully. Every single day, and also never. That doesn't make sense. No, it doesn't, but it's true. He set down his mug. I miss Rachel so much some days I can't breathe. I miss the life we were building, the future we'd planned. I miss the version of myself who thought things would work out if I just worked hard enough and loved enough and did everything right. But if I went back, if I could somehow undo it all, Sophie wouldn't exist as she is now, and I can't imagine that. I can't imagine not having her exactly as she is. So you carry both. So I carry both, Liam agreed. The grief and the gratitude, the loss and the life that grew around it. Some days one weighs more than the other, but they're both always there. Victoria was quiet, staring at something Liam couldn't see. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. I don't know what I carry anymore. Just weight. Just this sense that I'm supposed to be doing something important, but I can't remember why it matters. When did you last take a vacation? She looked at him like he'd asked when she last grew wings and flew. I don't remember. Years, probably. There's always too much. Always too much, Liam finished. Always one more crisis. One more deal. One more reason it has to be you, and it has to be now. I get it. I used to think like that too. But you don't anymore. I can't anymore. Sophie won't let me. She doesn't care about deals or promotions or proving myself. She just wants me there. Present. Actually paying attention instead of running through tomorrow's schedule in my head. Liam leaned forward. Maybe you need a Sophie in your life. Someone who demands you stop and just be. I wouldn't know what to do with that, Victoria admitted. How to be anything other than what I've always been. You could start by sitting on a stranger's couch at 1 a.m, drinking coffee and admitting you're scared. Liam smiled. Seems like a decent first step. Victoria met his eyes and something passed between them. Understanding maybe, or recognition. Two people who'd been running on empty for so long they'd forgotten what full felt like. Two people who'd shown up at each other's doors, literally and metaphorically, because they didn't know where else to go. Thank you, Victoria said quietly. For this. For tonight. For not making me feel like I'm weak for being frightened. You're not weak, you're human. There's a difference. I'm not sure there is. Not in my world. Then maybe your world needs adjusting. Victoria laughed, soft and sad. If only it were that simple. They sat in comfortable silence after that, the kind that didn't need filling. Outside, the city moved toward Christmas morning. Inside, two people who barely knew each other shared a space that felt, for reasons neither could fully explain, safe. Eventually, Victoria stood, checking her phone. Nearly 2 a.m. I should go. Let you get some sleep before your daughter comes home. Sophie won't be back until tomorrow afternoon. Liam stood as well. You're welcome to stay longer if you don't feel safe leaving. I'll be fine. The car is gone. I'm probably overreacting to everything. But she didn't move toward the door, just stood there, coat over her arm, looking uncertain. Or, Liam said carefully, you could stay until morning. Take the couch. I'll take Sophie's bed. She's got about 40 stuffed animals in there, but they're surprisingly comfortable. That way you're not driving home alone in the middle of the night. And if that car does come back, there's someone else here. I couldn't. You could. It's just sleep, rest, permission to stop pretending you're fine for a few hours. Liam kept his voice gentle. No expectations, no weird dynamics. Just one exhausted human being helping another exhausted human being get through the night. Victoria studied him, and Liam could see her weighing options, calculating risks, trying to figure out the angle. But there wasn't an angle. There was just the truth. Neither of them wanted to be alone, and for one night, they didn't have to be. Okay, Victoria said finally, if you're sure. I'm sure. Liam found her spare blankets and a pillow that didn't smell too much like detergent. He showed her where the bathroom was, offered her a t-shirt to sleep in if she wanted to get out of her work clothes, tried not to think about how surreal it was to be playing host to Victoria Hale in his cramped apartment. There's leftover Chinese food in the fridge if you get hungry, he said, hovering in the hallway like an awkward teenager. And coffee's on the counter if you want more. Help yourself to anything. Liam, Victoria stopped him with his name. Thank you, really. I don't have words for how much this means. Get some rest, Liam said, because he didn't have words either for what this night had become. We'll figure out the rest in the morning. He retreated to Sophie's room, closing the door behind him. The space smelled like his daughter, That particular mix of children's shampoo and crayons and something indefinably sweet. Her stuffed animals watched him from their positions around the small bed, button eyes knowing. Liam lay down on the narrow mattress, staring at the ceiling with its glow-in-the-dark stars Sophie had insisted on putting up last year. He could hear Victoria moving around in the living room, settling onto the couch, the apartment's familiar creaks and sounds somehow different with another person there. He didn't expect to sleep. His mind was too full of questions and impossibilities. But exhaustion pulled him down anyway. And the last thing he thought before darkness claimed him was that maybe, just for tonight, neither of them had to carry their weight alone. Liam woke to pale winter light filtering through Sophie's curtains and the disorienting sensation of being in the wrong bed. For a moment his brain scrambled to place himself, too small, too many stuffed animals, wrong angle to the window, before memory crashed back in fragments. Victoria. The car. Coffee at midnight. The impossible reality of his boss sleeping on his couch. He checked his phone. 7:13, Christmas morning. Outside, the city was probably still quiet, that brief window before kids woke up and chaos descended. Inside his apartment, he could hear nothing, no movement, no sounds of Victoria stirring. Liam sat up carefully, his back protesting the narrow mattress. He was still wearing yesterday's clothes, rumpled and uncomfortable. For a moment he just sat there, trying to reconcile the previous night with daylight reality. Had it actually happened? Had Victoria Hale really shown up terrified at his door, admitted she was lonely, fallen asleep on his second-hand couch? He stood and opened the door quietly, half expecting the living room to be empty. Some fever dream his exhausted brain had conjured to make the silence less oppressive. But no. Victoria was there, still asleep on the couch, curled on her side with the blanket pulled up to her shoulders. She'd taken him up on the t-shirt offer. He could see his old college shirt, faded gray with the logo that had mostly worn away. Her dark hair had come loose from whatever style she'd been wearing, falling across her face in a way that made her look younger, vulnerable. Liam stood in the doorway, uncertain. The smart thing would be to retreat, let her wake on her own, maintain some semblance of professional distance. But the apartment was cold. The heating was on a timer to save money, and Victoria was shivering slightly in her sleep. He moved quietly to adjust the thermostat, then started the coffee maker. The familiar sounds seemed to fill the space, grounding him. This was still his apartment, still his life. The surreal elements of last night didn't change the basic mechanics of morning. What time is it? Liam turned. Victoria was awake, sitting up, pushing hair out of her face. Without makeup, wearing his oversized shirt, she looked nothing like the polished CEO from the office. She looked like someone who'd had a rough night and was trying to get her bearings. "Little after 7, Liam said. "Coffee's almost ready. Did you sleep okay?" "Better than I have in weeks." Victoria rubbed her eyes, then seemed to realize what she'd admitted. "That probably says something concerning about my sleep habits. Or about how exhausted you were." Liam pulled down 2 mugs. "Cream? Sugar? Black is fine." "That's what I figured last night, but I wanted to confirm." Victoria stood, folding the blanket with automatic precision despite the circumstances. "I should go. I've imposed long enough, and you probably have plans." "Sophie won't be back until this afternoon, and my plans consist of eating leftover Chinese food and watching whatever Christmas movie is on TV." Liam poured 2 cups, brought one over. "You're welcome to stay for breakfast, or at least until you feel safe heading home." Victoria took the coffee, wrapped both hands around it like she had last night. "You don't have to keep being kind to me." "I'm not being kind. I'm being practical. If you leave now and that car is out there waiting, I'll spend the rest of the day wondering if you made it home okay. And I don't need that kind of anxiety on top of everything else." Still emotionally manipulative. "Still whatever works." Liam smiled. "Besides, it's Christmas. Even terrible bosses deserve coffee on Christmas." "I am a terrible boss." Victoria said it flatly, like a confirmed diagnosis. "I said even terrible bosses. I didn't confirm you were one." "You didn't have to." She moved to the window, careful to stay to the side, and looked out at the street. "You've worked for me for 18 months, and last night was the first real conversation we've ever had. That's not a good track record." Liam joined her at the window, scanning the street below. A few parked cars, all empty. Someone walking a dog. Normal morning activity. No dark sedans, no suspicious figures. For what it's worth, Liam said, I don't think being focused on work makes you terrible. Just singular. Like you've optimized for one thing at the expense of everything else. That's a diplomatic way of saying I have no life. You have a life. It's just narrow. And probably exhausting. Victoria took a sip of coffee, still watching the street. I used to think it was enough. The company, the success, the constant forward motion. I told myself that connection and relationships were luxuries I'd get to eventually, after I'd proven myself, after I'd built something that mattered. And now? Now I'm standing in my assistant's apartment on Christmas morning because I was too scared to go home alone. She turned to look at him. That feels like a reckoning I've been avoiding for a long time. Liam didn't have an easy answer for that. He sipped his own coffee and tried to find words that weren't platitudes. After Rachel died, he said finally, I had this moment about 6 months in where I realized I'd been functioning but not living, just going through motions. Work, Sophie, sleep, repeat. And I remember thinking, is this it? Is this what the rest of my life looks like? Just surviving until I don't have to anymore? What did you do? Nothing, mostly. Kept surviving. But I stopped pretending it was the same as living. Liam set down his mug. I think that's the hardest part. Admitting that what you're doing isn't working without knowing what would work instead. I don't know how to do anything else. Victoria's voice was quiet. I've been this person for so long. The CEO. The decision maker, the one who has all the answers. I don't know who I am when I'm not that. Maybe that's what you figure out next. Maybe. But she didn't sound convinced. They stood there in silence, watching the morning city wake up. Liam found himself acutely aware of the strangeness of this moment. Standing in comfortable silence with a woman who 24 hours ago existed in a completely separate sphere of his life. A woman who was still technically his boss, even though that designation felt meaningless in the context of shared vulnerability and 3 a.m. confessions. I should check in with security, Victoria said, pulling out her phone. Let Edward know I'm all right. He's probably already sent out a search party. You didn't tell him you were coming here? I didn't tell anyone. Last night wasn't exactly planned. Victoria moved away from the window, typing rapidly on her phone. Liam busied himself in the kitchen, giving her privacy while she dealt with whatever fallout came from disappearing on Christmas Eve. He found eggs in the fridge, bread that was only slightly stale, basic breakfast materials. Nothing fancy, but better than cold Chinese food. How do you feel about scrambled eggs? He called over. You don't have to cook for me. It's not for you, it's for me. I'm just making extra in case you're hungry. He heard Victoria's soft laugh. Then I feel fine about scrambled eggs. Liam cracked eggs into a bowl, whisked them with practiced efficiency. Cooking was one of those things he'd had to learn quickly after Rachel died. She'd been the kitchen expert, able to make something delicious out of random ingredients. He'd been the guy who burned toast and ordered takeout. But necessity was a thorough teacher, and after 3 years he could manage basic meals that Sophie would actually eat. Edward wants me to file a police report, Victoria said, returning to the kitchen. She'd pulled on her slacks from last night but kept his t-shirt on, creating an odd hybrid of professional and casual. About the car. He thinks I should have called him immediately. Probably should have, Liam agreed, pouring the eggs into the heated pan. Though I understand why you didn't. Do you? You didn't want to look scared, vulnerable, like you'd made a mistake dismissing your security detail. Liam stirred the eggs, keeping them moving. Easier to handle it yourself than admit you needed help. Victoria leaned against the counter, watching him cook. You're oddly perceptive for an administrative assistant. I'm oddly a lot of things for an administrative assistant. Liam pulled down plates. Engineering degree, remember? I can calculate load-bearing stress and make mediocre scrambled eggs. Renaissance man. These smell better than mediocre. Wait until you taste them. The smell is deceptive. But when he plated the eggs and handed Victoria a fork, she took a bite and made a small sound of approval. These are good. Don't sound so surprised. I'm not surprised. She paused, seeming to search for words. I'm realizing I made a lot of assumptions about you. About your life. I pictured something smaller, I think. Sadder. A man just barely keeping his head above water. That's accurate some days. But not all days, and not in the way I thought. Victoria took another bite. You have this whole life I knew nothing about. Skills and history and depth. And I reduced you to a function. The person who manages my calendar and answers my emails. I'm sorry for that. Liam ate his own eggs, considering his response. I didn't exactly make myself known, either. It's easier to be invisible sometimes. Less complicated. Is that what you are at work? Invisible? Invisible adjacent. I do my job, stay out of the way, don't make waves. It's not personal. It's just survival takes energy. I don't have extra for office politics or networking or any of that. Victoria nodded slowly. I think that's why I came here last night. Because you were invisible enough that showing up wouldn't complicate things professionally, but visible enough that I knew you'd open the door. That's pretty calculated for someone who was terrified. I'm always calculating, even when I'm falling apart. She set down her fork. That's part of the problem, I think. I can't turn it off. Can't stop running through scenarios and weighing options and trying to control outcomes. What would happen if you did? Turn it off? I don't know. That's what scares me. Victoria looked at him directly. I've built my entire identity around being in control. Being the smartest person in the room, making the hard calls. If I'm not that, what am I? Liam thought about the question while he finished his eggs. It was the kind of thing Rachel would have had an insightful answer for, some wisdom drawn from her psychology degree and natural empathy. He just had his own fumbling experience with identity collapse and forced reconstruction. After Rachel died, he said, I had to figure out who I was when I wasn't half of a couple. When I wasn't the husband who brought her tea in the morning and knew exactly how she liked her sandwich cut. All those small things that defined me in relation to her, they didn't work anymore. I was just Liam, alone, and I didn't know what that meant. How did you figure it out? I didn't, not really. I just started making decisions based on what Sophie needed, and eventually those decisions formed a shape, a life. It's not the life I planned, but it's real. It works most days. So I should have a child to give my life structure? Victoria's tone was wry. No. You should maybe stop defining yourself entirely by your job and see what else is there. Liam collected their plates. Take a vacation. Read a book that has nothing to do with business. Sleep past 6 a.m. Small rebellions against the person you've been. I don't know how to do small. Then start microscopic and work your way up. Victoria smiled, and Liam was struck again by how different she looked when she let her guard down. Not softer exactly, but more human. Less like an archetype and more like a person. I'm supposed to have dinner with the board chair tonight, Victoria said. Christmas dinner at his house in Connecticut. Very formal, very strategic. His wife invited me weeks ago, and I accepted because it seemed professionally advantageous. Sounds delightful. It sounds exhausting. 3 hours of careful conversation where every word is weighed for implications, where I have to be on the entire time, managing perceptions and relationships. She looked at Liam. I don't want to go. For the first time in my career, I'm looking at a professional obligation and thinking I'd rather be literally anywhere else. So don't go. I can't just not go. Why not? Call and say you're not feeling well, which is true. You were up all night because someone followed you. That's a legitimate reason to cancel. Victoria shook her head. It's not that simple. Douglas Winters doesn't accept cancellations well. He'd see it as a slight. Then slight him. Liam rinsed the plates. What's he going to do, fire you? You're the CEO. You own more of the company than he does. It's not about firing. It's about alliance. About maintaining relationships with the people who can make my life difficult if they choose to. Victoria's voice had taken on that corporate edge, the one that meant she was retreating into professional mode. You don't understand how these dynamics work. You're right, I don't. But I understand that you spent last night terrified and exhausted, and maybe what you need today isn't strategic networking. Maybe it's just rest. I don't know how to do that either. Then learn. Consider it part of your microscopic rebellion. Victoria was quiet for a long moment, conflict playing across her face. Liam could practically see the calculation happening, weighing professional consequences against personal needs, trying to optimize an equation that maybe didn't have a right answer. What would you do? She asked finally. If you were me. If you had this obligation but didn't want to go. I'd call and cancel, but I'm not you. I don't have your responsibilities or your position. Liam dried his hands on a dish towel. I just know that life's too short to spend Christmas with people you don't actually like because it might be professionally useful. That's easy to say when you're not the one maintaining a billion-dollar company. True. It's also easy to say when I've already lost the person I loved most and learned that professional success doesn't mean much when you're alone. Liam met her eyes. I'm not trying to tell you what to do. I'm just saying maybe there's more than one way to measure what matters. Victoria looked away, her jaw tight. For a moment, Liam thought he'd pushed too far, crossed some line from honest into preachy. Then her shoulders dropped and she let out a long breath. I hate that you're right, she said quietly. I'm not right. I'm just tired of watching people, including myself, make decisions based on fear instead of what they actually want. And what do I actually want? I don't know. What do you want? Victoria turned back to him, and there was something raw in her expression. I want to not go to Douglas Winter's house and pretend to care about his wife's interior decorating choices while he subtly questions my quarterly decisions. I want to stay here in this apartment that's too small and too warm and smells like coffee and not think about work for 5 consecutive minutes. I want... She stopped, shook her head. This is stupid. It's not stupid. Keep going. I want to feel like a person instead of a position, just for one day. Her voice cracked slightly on the last word. Is that pathetic? That I'd rather hide out in my assistant's apartment than face my actual life? It's not pathetic. It's honest. Liam moved closer, not touching, but present. And for what it's worth, you're welcome to stay. No expectations, no agenda, just space to be whatever you need to be for a while. Why would you do that? After everything, after how I've treated you, why would you offer that? Liam thought about the question. The easy answer was pity. The truthful answer was more complicated, tangled up in his own loneliness and the unexpected comfort of having someone else in the apartment. Someone who understood, in her own way, what it meant to be running on empty while pretending everything was fine. Because I know what it's like to need somewhere to hide, he said finally. And because last night, having you here made the silence less awful. So maybe it's selfish. Maybe I'm offering because I don't want to be alone either. Victoria's eyes were bright, and Liam realized with some alarm that she might cry. But she blinked it back, that iron control reasserting itself even as it cracked at the edges. Okay, she said. Okay, I'll cancel. I'll tell Douglas I'm not feeling well, which is true, and I'll stay, if you're sure. I'm sure. What do we do? I don't know how to just exist without agenda. Liam almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Victoria Hale, master strategist, asking him how to spend a day without purpose. We start with more coffee, he said. Then we figure it out from there. Very low stakes, very low pressure. More coffee I can handle. They moved back to the living room, carrying their refilled mugs. The morning light was stronger now, turning the apartment's shabby edges slightly less noticeable. Victoria sat on the couch, this time settling into it rather than perching. Liam took his usual chair. Tell me about Sophie, Victoria said after a moment. Really tell me, not just the basics. Liam pulled out his phone and found a recent photo, Sophie at the park, mid-laugh, her hair wild and her jacket unzipped despite his repeated reminders. He passed the phone to Victoria. She's beautiful, Victoria said softly. She has your eyes. And her mother's stubbornness, worst possible combination. But Liam was smiling. She wants to be a paleontologist, or an astronaut, or a teacher. It changes daily. Yesterday she informed me she's going to discover a new dinosaur and name it after our neighbor's cat. What's the cat's name? Mr. Whiskers. So we're looking at the Whiskersaurus, apparently. Victoria laughed, genuine and unguarded. That's perfect. Well, she's the best part of my life. The hardest part, too. Every decision I make, I'm thinking about how it affects her, whether I'm giving her enough, whether I'm screwing up in ways that'll take years to manifest. You're not screwing up, Victoria said, still looking at the photo. You can tell just from this picture. She's happy. That's everything. Some days I'm not sure it's enough. Her friends have 2 parents, nice houses, vacations. I'm giving her a cramped apartment and takeout dinners, and a dad who's too tired to play most nights. You're giving her presents, attention, love. Victoria handed back the phone. That's more than a lot of kids get, regardless of how many parents or how big the house. Liam pocketed the phone. Did you have that, growing up? No. Victoria's voice went flat. I had parents who were very invested in my achievements and very uninterested in me as a person. My father was a lawyer, corporate litigation. Success was the only metric that mattered. Straight A's were expected. Anything less was failure. That sounds lonely. It was preparation. At least that's what he called it. Preparation for the real world, where nobody cares about your feelings, only your results. She took a sip of coffee. He died 5 years ago. Heart attack. I was in Tokyo when it happened, finalizing a deal. I didn't make it back in time to say goodbye. I'm sorry. Don't be. We weren't close. I'd built my life according to his principles. Work harder than everyone else, never show weakness, achievement equals worth. But I didn't actually like him very much. Victoria smiled without humor. I think that makes me a terrible person. It makes you honest. There's no rule that says you have to mourn someone just because they're related to you. My mother certainly thinks there is. She's never forgiven me for not falling apart. For going back to work 2 days after the funeral, Victoria set down her mug, but falling apart felt like proving him right. That emotions were weakness, that the only thing that mattered was pushing forward. Is that what you really think, or just what you were taught? Victoria was quiet for a long moment. I don't know anymore. It's been the operating principle for so long that I can't separate what I believe from what I was conditioned to believe. Liam understood that more than he wanted to admit. How much of his own life was choice versus momentum versus the path of least resistance? How much was him versus the shape of the hole Rachel's death had left? My sister thinks I should date, he said, surprising himself with the confession. She keeps trying to set me up with friends of friends, nice women with stable jobs and no major red flags. And I keep making excuses because I can't imagine. I don't know how to do that again. How to let someone in when I know how bad it hurts when they leave. Have you tried? Once, about a year ago, went on exactly one date with a teacher from Sophie's school. She was lovely, smart, funny, good with kids. We had absolutely nothing to talk about. I spent the entire dinner thinking about everything I needed to do at home, and she spent it being very patient with how checked out I was. We never went out again. But your sister keeps trying. She thinks I'm wasting my life. That Rachel wouldn't want me to be alone forever. Liam rubbed his face. She's probably right. But knowing something intellectually and feeling ready for it are different things. So you stay invisible, safe. Don't risk connection because connection means potential loss. Says the woman who works 80 hours a week to avoid going home to an empty apartment. Victoria smiled grimly. We're both terrible at this, aren't we? At being human beings with needs beyond basic survival. Spectacularly terrible, Liam agreed. But at least we're self-aware about it. That's got to count for something. They fell into silence again, but it was comfortable now. The initial strangeness of the situation had worn off, replaced by something that felt almost like friendship, or at least fellow feeling. Two people who'd found themselves in the same unlikely space, speaking truths they didn't usually voice. Victoria's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and Liam saw her expression shift, that professional mask sliding back into place. Edward, she said. He wants to send someone over. Check the area, make sure it's secure. Do you want that? I don't know. Part of me wants the security. The other part wants to pretend last night didn't happen, and I'm just... She gestured vaguely at the apartment, at herself in his t-shirt, at the impossible situation. Taking a personal day. You can have both. Let Edward send someone. They can check the perimeter, verify nobody's watching the building. Then you know you're actually safe instead of just hoping you are. Victoria nodded slowly. That's practical. I have my moments. She typed a response, then set the phone aside. He'll have someone here within the hour. Very discreet. They'll check things out and report back. Good. Thank you for not making me feel paranoid about this. You're not paranoid if someone actually was following you. Liam stood. I'm going to take a shower if that's okay. Make yourself at home. TV remote's on the coffee table if you want to find something to watch. He escaped to the bathroom before the domesticity of the moment could get any weirder. Letting his boss make herself comfortable in his living room while he showered, that wasn't something they'd covered in any workplace training he'd received. The shower was hot and too short, The water pressure adequate, but not great. Liam stood under the spray and tried to organize his thoughts into something coherent. 24 hours ago, his biggest concern had been getting through another solo Christmas. Now he was hosting Victoria Hale, who'd shown up scared and vulnerable and nothing like the person he thought he knew. And the strangest part was how not strange it felt. Once you got past the initial impossibility, having Victoria here was just nice, easy, like they'd been friends for years instead of employer and employee who barely spoke. When he emerged, dressed in clean jeans and a sweater that was only slightly worn at the elbows, he found Victoria standing at his bookshelf. She'd found one of Rachel's old books, a paperback mystery with a cracked spine and notes in the margins. "Sorry," she said, looking up. "I was being nosy." "It's fine. Not much to discover. Half of those are Rachel's. I can't bring myself to get rid of them, but I can't bring myself to read them either." Victoria carefully returned the book to its spot. "What was she like?" "Your wife." Liam moved to stand beside her, looking at the spines like they held answers. "Brilliant. Funny in unexpected ways. She saw the world different than most people. Could find joy in weird places. Rain on Tuesdays. The way light hit buildings at certain angles. Small moments most people missed. You loved her very much." "I did. Still do, in whatever way you love someone who's gone. It's different now, less sharp, but it doesn't go away." "Do you think it should go away?" "I don't know. My sister thinks I should move on, let go. But it feels like if I let go completely, I'm erasing her, saying she didn't matter enough to carry forward." Victoria turned to face him. "Or maybe carrying her forward means living fully enough that the life you're living honors what you built together. Not staying frozen in grief, but using what she taught you to do better." "That's a nice thought." "But you don't believe it." "I don't know what I believe anymore." Liam moved to the window, checking the street out of habit. "I know I'm tired. I know Sophie deserves a father who's more present. I know I can't keep running on empty forever. Beyond that, it's just noise, static, getting through days." "Does it help having someone to talk to about it?" Liam considered the question. When had he last talked about Rachel to anyone who wasn't his sister delivering well-meaning platitudes? When had he last admitted out loud that he was struggling instead of just handling it? "Yeah," he said finally. "It helps. Even if nothing changes, it helps to say it." Victoria's phone buzzed again. She checked it, nodded. "Security's outside. They're doing a sweep now." They waited in silence, both watching the street. After about 15 minutes, Victoria's phone rang. She answered, listened, asked a few terse questions. When she hung up, some of the tension had left her shoulders. "Nothing," she said. "No suspicious vehicles. No one watching the building. Whoever was following me last night, they're either gone or never existed." "That's good." "Edward still wants me to file a report, create a paper trail in case it happens again." Victoria sank back onto the couch. "He's probably right. But the thought of explaining last night to the police, where I went, why I came here instead of going home, I don't want to deal with questions." "You don't have to explain anything. You can file a report about the car without telling them where you ended up." "They'll ask, and I'm a terrible liar." "So tell them the truth. Someone was following you and you stopped at a friend's place until you felt safe." Liam sat across from her. "That's accurate, if reductive." "We're friends now?" Victoria asked, and there was something in her voice, not quite hope, but maybe curiosity about the possibility. "I don't know what we are, but we're something more than boss and employee after last night." "What do we do with that? When we go back to work and everything returns to normal?" "I don't know. Pretend it never happened, probably. That's what you wanted, right? Back to normal." Victoria looked at him for a long moment. "I did want that. Last night, when I asked you to pretend none of this happened, I meant it, but now I'm not sure I do anymore." "Why not?" "Because going back means I'm alone again. Means there's nobody who knows—" She stopped, seemed to gather herself. "Nobody who knows that I'm terrified most of the time, that I have no idea if I'm making the right decisions, that the confidence everyone sees is mostly performance." "Everyone's performance," Liam said quietly. "We're all just making it up and hoping nobody notices." "Maybe, but most people have someone to drop the performance with, someone who sees them without the mask." Victoria's voice was steady, but her eyes were not. I haven't had that in a very long time. If ever. You have it now, if you want it. What does that mean? Liam wasn't entirely sure. They existed in different worlds, moved through different spheres, but something had shifted between them. Some understanding reached in the vulnerable hours of early morning, and he found he didn't want to lose that just because daylight made it seem impossible. It means we're honest with each other, he said. At work, I'm still your assistant. I'll still manage your calendar and fetch your coffee and stay 3 steps behind. But outside of that, maybe we can be people who actually see each other, who don't have to pretend everything's fine when it's not. That's dangerous, Victoria said, blurring those lines. Probably, but I think we already blurred them. Might as well acknowledge it. Victoria smiled, small and uncertain. Okay, dangerous honesty it is. Her phone buzzed yet again. She glanced at it, and her expression shuddered. Douglas Winters, probably checking that I'm still coming tonight. Are you? No. Victoria typed rapidly. I'm sending my regrets, citing security concerns from last night, which is true enough. She hit send before she could second-guess herself. There. Done. I'm officially playing hooky for my professional obligations. How does it feel? Terrifying. Liberating? Both. Victoria set the phone down decisively. So what do people do on Christmas when they're not networking? Honestly, I usually just exist quietly until it's time to pick up Sophie, watch movies, avoid the internet, try not to think too hard about how different this year is from years past. That sounds perfect, Victoria said, and meant it. So that's what they did. They ended up watching It's a Wonderful Life because it was on, and neither of them had the energy to find something else. Liam had seen it a dozen times, maybe more. Rachel used to cry at the ending every single year, and he'd tease her about it even as he handed her tissues. Now he watched it with a kind of numb detachment, the sentimentality bouncing off him like rain off glass. Victoria sat at the other end of the couch, her legs tucked under her, still wearing his t-shirt. She'd given up on checking her phone every few minutes. It sat face down on the coffee table, occasionally buzzing with notifications she ignored. This is deeply manipulative, Victoria said about halfway through, when George Bailey was spiraling into despair. The whole premise, one person's existence affecting an entire town, it's statistically absurd. It's not supposed to be realistic. It's supposed to make you feel things. I'm feeling manipulated. But Liam noticed she didn't look away. And when the ending came, the whole town showing up, the bell ringing, the sappy music swelling, he saw her wipe at her eyes quickly, like she hoped he wouldn't notice. You cried, he said. I did not. You absolutely did. It's allergies. Your apartment is very dusty. My apartment is immaculate, Liam said, which was a complete lie. Just admit the movie got to you. Victoria shot him a look that probably terrified board members, but there was no real heat in it. Fine. It got to me. Happy? Thrilled. Victoria Hale has feelings. This is breaking news. Don't be smug. It's not attractive. The word hung in the air for a moment. Attractive. And Liam felt something shift in the atmosphere. Not uncomfortable exactly, but charged. Aware. He was suddenly conscious of how close they were sitting, of the fact that Victoria was wearing his clothes, of the intimacy that had developed over the past 12 hours. He stood abruptly, needing distance. I should make lunch. Are you hungry? I could eat. Liam escaped to the kitchen, grateful for something to do with his hands. The lunch options were limited, more eggs, some questionable deli meat, half a loaf of bread. He settled on grilled cheese because it was hard to screw up and vaguely festive. Victoria joined him, leaning against the counter. Can I help? You know how to cook? I can manage toast without burning down the building. Barely. Then you can butter the bread. Butter's in the fridge. They worked in silence, falling into an easy rhythm. Victoria buttered while Liam heated the pan and sliced cheese. It was domestic in a way that should have felt wrong, but didn't. Just two people making lunch together, nothing more complicated than that. I haven't done this in years, Victoria said, watching the sandwiches brown in the pan. Made grilled cheese. Made anything. Cooked with another person. I eat most meals at my desk or in restaurants where someone else handles everything. That sounds lonely. It's efficient. But her voice lacked conviction. Or it was. Now it just sounds sad. Liam flipped the sandwiches. You could change that. Learn to cook. Invite people over. Have a life outside of work. I wouldn't know who to invite. Everyone I know is either an employee or a business contact. Those aren't the same as friends. What about from before? College friends? Old colleagues? Lost touch years ago. I moved up, they moved on. After a while, the calls stopped coming. Victoria picked at a loose thread on his t-shirt. I think people get tired of someone who cancels plans last minute because of work emergencies. Eventually, they stop including you. So make new friends. How? Join a book club? Take a pottery class? I'm 43 years old. People my age have established friend groups. They're not looking for new additions. People are always looking for connection. You just have to be willing to show up as yourself instead of as the CEO. Victoria was quiet while Liam plated the sandwiches. When they sat down at the small kitchen table, Liam had to clear off some of Sophie's coloring books first. She took a bite and made a small sound of satisfaction. This is good. It's grilled cheese. The bar is not high. Still good. She took another bite, chewed thoughtfully. I had a friend once, in college, Sarah. We were roommates freshman year, stayed close all 4 years. She was studying literature while I was in business. We used to stay up late arguing about capitalism and art and whether success could be measured in anything other than money. What happened to her? I chose my career over her wedding. I was supposed to be her maid of honor, but there was this opportunity, a chance to work directly with the VP of strategy at my first real job. He needed someone to accompany him to Singapore for 2 weeks, and it overlapped with Sarah's wedding weekend. I took the trip. Victoria set down her sandwich. She never forgave me. I told myself it was worth it. That job led to another, which led to another. Look where I am now. VP of strategy became my mentor. I learned everything from him. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd gone to the wedding? All the time. Would I still be here? Would I have made different choices? Would I be less? She gestured at herself, encompassing everything. Vamos sin. This. What's wrong with this? I'm having lunch with my assistant on Christmas because I have nobody else. That's what's wrong with this. Liam finished his own sandwich before responding. I'm having lunch with my boss because my wife is dead and my daughter is with my sister. We're both here because life didn't work out the way we planned. That doesn't make us pathetic, it just makes us human. When did you get so wise? I'm not wise. I'm just tired of pretending everything's fine when it's not. Liam collected their plates. And I'm tired of watching other people do the same thing. We're all walking around acting like we have it together, and we're all barely holding on. Maybe if we admitted that more often, we'd all feel less alone. Victoria stood, moved to the window again. It had become her spot, that corner where she could watch without being seen. There's a car out there, different from last night, silver SUV. It's been parked there for about 20 minutes. Liam joined her, following her gaze. The SUV sat 3 cars down, engine off, windows tinted. Could be anything. Someone visiting family, lost tourist. Or someone watching. Do you really think they'd come back, in broad daylight on Christmas? I don't know what to think anymore. Victoria's voice was tight. Maybe I'm being paranoid. Maybe last night was nothing, and I'm seeing threats where there aren't any, but I can't shake this feeling that something's wrong. Liam pulled out his phone. I'm calling Edward. Let security check it out. Better paranoid and safe than dismissive and sorry. He made the call, explained the situation. Edward answered immediately. Apparently he'd been waiting, and said someone would be there in 10 minutes. True to his word, 9 minutes later, a nondescript sedan pulled up, and a man in casual clothes got out. He walked past the SUV, seemingly oblivious, then circled the block. Liam's phone rang. It's a family from New Jersey, Edward said without preamble. They're visiting someone in your building. Building manager confirmed it. License plate matches their registration. Stand down. Thank you, Liam said and hung up. He relayed the information to Victoria. She nodded, but the tension didn't leave her shoulders. I'm losing it. I'm seeing conspiracies and visiting families. You're scared. That's different from losing it. Is it? Because right now I can't tell. Victoria moved away from the window, pacing the small living room. What if this is what I've become? So paranoid and isolated that I see danger everywhere. So disconnected from normal life that I don't know the difference between a real threat and someone visiting their relatives. Last night was real. Someone followed you. That's not paranoia, that's fact. But was it really? Or was it just someone driving in the same direction who happened to make the same turns? Maybe I manufactured a crisis because some part of me wanted an excuse to run, to end up somewhere, anywhere, that wasn't my empty apartment. Liam caught her arm gently, stopping her pacing. Hey, stop. You're spiraling. I'm being realistic. You're being cruel to yourself. There's a difference. He kept his hand on her arm, grounding. Someone followed you. Whether it was intentional or coincidence, it scared you. That's valid. Coming here was valid. Everything you're feeling is valid. Victoria looked at his hand on her arm, then up at his face. Why do you care? You barely know me. I'm just your boss who showed up uninvited and disrupted your entire holiday. You're not just anything. You're a person who needed help, and I was the one you trusted enough to ask. Liam released her arm but didn't step back. And maybe helping you helps me too. Maybe I needed the disruption. Maybe sitting alone in this apartment was killing me a little bit, and having someone else here, even under weird circumstances, is better than the alternative. So we're using each other. We're helping each other. There's a difference. Victoria held his gaze for a long moment, and Liam saw something shift in her expression. The defensive walls lowering, the corporate mask slipping. Just a woman standing in a borrowed t-shirt trying to figure out how she'd ended up here. I don't know how to do this, she said quietly. How to be vulnerable without it feeling like weakness. How to ask for help without calculating what it costs. You just do it, badly at first, then slightly less badly. Eventually it gets easier. Does it get easier? I don't know, I'm still waiting to find out. Victoria almost smiled. We're a mess, aren't we? Spectacularly. The moment stretched between them, heavy with things unsaid. Liam was acutely aware of how close they were standing, of the faint scent of his soap on her skin, of how different she looked without the armor of her professional persona. Human, touchable, real in a way she never was at work. He stepped back before his thoughts could go anywhere more complicated. We should do something. Sitting around waiting for danger gets exhausting. What do people do on Christmas besides work or avoid work? Watch more movies, play games, call family and pretend everything's great. Liam moved to the small closet beside the kitchen, pulled out a battered box. Sophie and I play Monopoly sometimes, though I should warn you, she's ruthless with property acquisition, gets it from her mother. You want to play Monopoly? I want to do something normal that doesn't involve staring out windows or analyzing our respective failures. Monopoly seemed neutral. Victoria looked at the box like it was a foreign object. I haven't played board games since college. Then you're overdue. They set up on the coffee table, clearing space among the remote controls and coffee mugs. The board was worn, some of the money creased, but everything was there. Liam dealt out the cash while Victoria picked her token, the dog, after a moment's deliberation. I'm going to destroy you, Victoria said, and there was a competitive edge to her voice that made Liam smile. Big talk from someone who hasn't played in 20 years. Some skills don't fade. She wasn't wrong. Victoria approached Monopoly the way she probably approached business, strategic, calculating, ruthless when necessary. She bought properties systematically, built houses with precision, and showed no mercy when Liam landed on her hotels. This is supposed to be fun, Liam protested when he had to mortgage Baltic Avenue to pay rent on Park Place. It is fun. I'm having a great time. You're bankrupting me. That's how you win. You're terrifying, you know that? Victoria grinned, and it transformed her face. I prefer competitive. They played for 2 hours, trading properties and insults, the afternoon sliding past without either of them noticing. At some point, Liam made more coffee. At another point, Victoria admitted she was hungry again, and they raided the kitchen for snacks, coming up with crackers and some questionable cheese that was technically still within its expiration date. I can't believe you're beating me, Liam said, surveying his dwindling cash reserves. I told you, some skills don't fade. This is humiliating, getting destroyed at Monopoly by my boss in my own apartment. Consider it a learning experience. I'm teaching you about ruthless business practices. I'm learning that you have no soul. Now you're getting it. But she was laughing as she said it, and Liam found himself laughing too. When was the last time he'd laughed like this? Not the polite chuckle he gave at work or the tired smile he managed for Sophie. Real laughter that came from somewhere genuine. Victoria won decisively, leaving Liam with nothing but mortgaged properties and crushed dignity. "I demand a rematch," he said. "Another time. I should probably check my phone. Make sure the company hasn't imploded without me." She picked up her phone and Liam watched her face change as she scrolled through messages. The lightness from the game faded, replaced by that familiar tension. Work creeping back in, reclaiming territory. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Define okay." "There are 37 unread emails, 12 missed calls. Edward wants me to reconsider the police report. Douglas is upset about the cancellation. His wife apparently planned the menu around my dietary restrictions." Victoria set down the phone. "The world continues spinning whether I'm there or not. Turns out I'm not as essential as I thought. Is that disappointing or relieving?" "Both, neither. I don't know." She rubbed her face. "Part of me wants to respond to everything right now, get back to normal. The other part wants to throw my phone out the window and pretend none of it exists." "What's stopping you? From throwing the phone, I mean." "Responsibility. The weight of knowing that my decisions affect hundreds of people's livelihoods. The fact that I've built my entire identity around being the person who responds immediately, who's always available, who never drops the ball." "What if you drop the ball? Just once? What's the worst that could happen?" Victoria considered this seriously. Things would get handled. Maybe not exactly how I would handle them, but handled nonetheless. The company would continue. People would adapt. The world would not end. "So maybe you're not as essential as you think. Maybe you've convinced yourself you have to be everywhere, do everything, because it's easier than admitting you could step back and things would be fine." "That's terrifying." "Why?" "Because if I'm not essential, if the company can function without me micromanaging every decision, then what's it all been for? All the sacrifices, all the relationships I didn't build, the experiences I didn't have. If I could have done less all along and things would have been fine." She stopped, her voice cracking. "Then I gave up everything for nothing." Liam didn't have an answer for that. The weight of that realization, that maybe the sacrifices weren't necessary, that maybe you chose wrong, was something he understood too well. He'd spent 2 years wondering if he'd failed Rachel by not pushing harder for experimental treatments, by accepting the doctor's prognosis instead of fighting until there was nothing left to fight with. "I don't think it was for nothing," he said finally. "Maybe it wasn't necessary in the way you thought. Maybe you could have worked less and still been successful. But the path you took made you who you are. For better or worse, this is the life you built. And maybe now you get to decide if you want to keep building it the same way or try something different." "Like what? Quit? Walk away from everything I've built?" "Like set boundaries, delegate more, actually take vacations. Small changes that add up to a different life." Victoria was quiet, staring at her phone like it held answers. When she spoke, her voice was soft. "I'm afraid if I start making changes, I'll realize how much I've missed. How much time I've wasted chasing something that maybe didn't matter as much as I thought it did." That realization is coming whether you make changes or not. At least if you start now, you have time to do something about it. "When did you become so wise?" Victoria asked for the second time that day. "I'm not wise. I'm just further along in the regret cycle than you are." "That's comforting." "It's honest." Victoria set her phone face down again, decisively. "I'm not responding. Not today. Edward can handle whatever comes up. The world can manage without me for 24 hours. Bold move. Terrifying move. But you're right. If I can't step back for one day, I'll never be able to step back at all." Liam's own phone buzzed. His sister. He answered, stepping into the kitchen for privacy. "Hey," Sarah said. "Just checking if you still want to pick up Sophie at 3 or if you want us to keep her longer. We were thinking of taking the kids to see the lights downtown if the weather holds." Liam glanced at the window. The afternoon light was already fading, that particular quality of winter days where darkness came too early. "What does Sophie want?" "She's having fun, but she keeps asking about you. I think she misses her dad." Something in Liam's chest tightened. "I'll come get her. Give me an hour." "Sounds good. Everything okay? You sound different." "I'm fine. It's been a weird day." "Weird how?" "Long story. I'll tell you later." He hung up and returned to the living room. Victoria had moved back to the window, watching the street with that careful attention that had become familiar. "I need to pick up Sophie soon," Liam said. "You're welcome to stay, but I should go." Victoria turned from the window. "I've imposed long enough, and you should have time with your daughter without your boss hanging around." "You're not imposing." "I am, but it's been—" She paused, searching for words. "This has been the most normal day I've had in years, the most honest conversations I've had in longer than that. So thank you for letting me hide out here, for not making me feel pathetic about it." "You're not pathetic. I showed up at your door at midnight because I was scared and alone. That's pretty textbook pathetic." "That's pretty textbook human." Liam moved closer, not quite touching, but present. "Everyone needs somewhere to go when things fall apart. I'm glad you felt like you could come here." "I didn't know I felt that until I was standing at your door." Victoria looked at him, really looked at him, and Liam saw something shift in her expression. "I think some part of me has been watching you for months, seeing how you manage everything. Work, Sophie, your grief. You never complain. Never ask for special treatment. Just show up and do what needs doing. There's dignity in that. A kind of strength I don't have. You have plenty of strength. You're just using it to hold yourself together instead of build something new. Maybe that's what I need to learn. How to stop just surviving and start actually living. If you figure out how, let me know. I'm still working on it myself." Victoria smiled, sad and genuine. "We'll figure it out together, badly at first, then slightly less badly." "You're mocking me now." "I'm learning from you. There's a difference." She moved to gather her things, her coat, her phone, her professional armor that had been shed for the better part of a day. When she emerged from the bathroom, she'd pulled her hair back, removed his t-shirt, reassembled herself into something closer to the Victoria Hale who inhabited corner offices and commanded boardrooms. But not quite. There was something different in how she held herself, slightly less rigid, like she'd given herself permission to take up space instead of just commanding it. "I'll have someone pick me up," Victoria said, phone in hand. "No need for you to—" "I can drive you. It's on the way to my sister's." "You don't have to." "I know, but the alternative is you standing outside waiting for a car, and after everything that's happened, I'd prefer to see you safely to your building." Victoria nodded. "Okay, thank you." They drove in Liam's beat-up sedan, the silence comfortable rather than awkward. The city was quiet with that particular Christmas afternoon stillness, most people inside with family, the streets empty of their usual chaos. "Do you ever think about what you'd do?" Victoria asked as they merged onto the highway. "If you could start over, if you had all the resources and none of the constraints." "Sometimes, usually late at night when I can't sleep and my brain decides to torture me with alternate timelines. And I think I'd do something with my hands, something where I could see tangible results, build houses maybe, or restore old cars, something that exists in the physical world instead of spreadsheets and meetings." "That's a good answer." "What about you?" Victoria was quiet for a long moment. "I think I'd travel, real travel, not business trips where I see the inside of conference rooms and hotel bars. I'd go places with no agenda, no schedule, just exist in different spaces and see what happens." "What's stopping you?" "Fear, habit, the fact that I don't know how to be a person who does things for no reason beyond wanting to." "You could learn." "Maybe." She looked out the window at the passing city. "I used to think I had time, that eventually I'd get to the things I wanted, but eventually keeps moving further away, and I'm running out of excuses." They reached Victoria's building, an elegant high-rise in the financial district, all glass and steel and expensive restraint. Liam pulled up to the entrance where a doorman was already moving to open her door. "Thank you," Victoria said, "for everything, for last night, for today, for not making me feel weak for needing help." "You're not weak. You're just finally being honest about what you need." "I'm going to try to remember that." She opened the door, then paused. "Liam, when we go back to work, can we not pretend this didn't happen? Can we just acknowledge that things are different now?" "How different?" "I don't know yet, but different. More honest, maybe. Less performance." "I can do that." "Good." Victoria smiled, and it reached her eyes. "Merry Christmas, Liam." Merry Christmas, Victoria. He watched her disappear into the building, then sat there for a moment before pulling away. His phone buzzed with a text from Sarah, Sophie asking where he was. He responded that he was on his way, then merged back into traffic. The drive to his sister's house took 20 minutes, the street slowly filling as people emerged from their holiday hibernation. Liam's mind kept circling back to the past 24 hours, trying to process what had happened. His boss had shown up scared. They'd talked, really talked, shared truths neither usually voiced, and somehow it had felt more real than most of his interactions in the past 3 years. What did you do with that? How did you integrate this strange, unexpected connection into the framework of normal life? Could you even go back to normal after something like this? Liam didn't have answers. He just knew that something had shifted, some wall had come down, and he couldn't quite regret it, even though it complicated everything. Sarah's house was chaos when he arrived. Kids running everywhere, wrapping paper scattered across the floor, the particular kind of Christmas disorder that came from too much sugar and not enough supervision. Sophie spotted him immediately and launched herself at his legs. "Daddy, I made you a picture!" She held up a drawing of what appeared to be a dinosaur wearing a Santa hat, or possibly a cat. The artistic intent was unclear, but the enthusiasm was apparent. "That's amazing, Bug. Did you have fun with your cousins?" "Yeah, we watched movies and ate cookies, and Aunt Sarah let us stay up late," and the words tumbled out in a rush, Sophie's face bright with the kind of joy that made Liam's chest ache. "Sounds like you had a good Christmas," he said, kneeling down to her level. "Did you? Were you lonely without me?" The question hit harder than it should have. "I missed you, but I wasn't lonely, not exactly." "Good. I don't like thinking about you being sad and lonely. I'm okay, Bug. Promise." Sarah appeared with Sophie's bag, giving Liam a searching look. "You sure you're okay? You look different." "Different how?" "I don't know. Less," she gestured vaguely. "Less like you're just going through motions, more present or something. It's been an interesting 24 hours. Are you going to tell me about it?" "Eventually, maybe." Liam took Sophie's bag. "Right now I just want to get this one home and hear about every single cookie she ate." "I ate 7, Sophie announced proudly. "Maybe 8. I lost count. 8 cookies. Well, no dinner for you then." "Daddy, no. I need dinner." They drove home in Sophie's enthusiastic chatter, her telling him every detail of her Christmas, while Liam made appropriate sounds of interest and amazement. When they got home, she ran immediately to her room to arrange her new toys, while Liam stood in the living room, looking at the space where Victoria had sat just hours before. The apartment felt different now, less suffocating. Like someone had opened a window and let fresh air in, and even though the window was closed now, the staleness had lifted. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. He opened it. "Made it home safely. Thank you again. See you Tuesday. V." Liam stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back. "Glad you're safe. See you Tuesday." He set the phone down and went to check on Sophie, who was already building an elaborate city for her dinosaurs to destroy. Normal life reasserting itself, the strange interlude of Christmas Eve fading into memory. But not forgotten. Never forgotten. Because something had changed. Some understanding had been reached in the vulnerable hours of shared honesty. And when Tuesday came, when they returned to the office in their respective roles, they'd both know something they hadn't known before. That beneath the professional distance, beneath the titles and hierarchies, they were just two people trying to figure out how to live with their respective loneliness. And maybe, just maybe, they didn't have to do it entirely alone anymore. Tuesday morning arrived with that particular dread that follows a long weekend, the kind where reality feels like a punishment after brief respite. Liam dropped Sophie at daycare and drove to the office through traffic that seemed heavier than usual, every red light a reminder that the strange bubble of Christmas was definitively over. He didn't know what to expect. Victoria's text had been professional, brief. "See you Tuesday." No indication of whether things would actually be different or if they'd both pretend the past few days had been some kind of fever dream. The office was quiet when he arrived. Most people had taken the week off. Liam made coffee in the break room, the familiar ritual grounding him. He was halfway through his second cup when his desk phone rang. "Mr. Carter, could you come to my office, please?" Victoria's voice was formal, CEO, professional. like the past weekend had never happened. Liam's stomach dropped. This was it. The conversation where they'd acknowledge it had been inappropriate, establish new boundaries, pretend that sitting on his couch in his t-shirt hadn't happened. He grabbed his notepad out of habit and headed to the elevator. Victoria's office was on the top floor, all windows and minimalist furniture, and the kind of view that cost more than most people made in a year. She stood facing those windows when he entered, hands clasped behind her back in that power pose she probably learned in some executive training. "Close the door," she said without turning around. Liam did, his heart rate picking up. This felt like getting called to the principal's office, like being about to get fired in the most elegant way possible. Victoria turned, and Liam was struck by how tired she looked. Professional, polished, but tired in a way that makeup couldn't quite hide. "How was the rest of your Christmas?" she asked, and her voice was softer now. Less CEO, more the woman who'd cried at a movie on his couch. "Good. Quiet." Sophie was exhausted from too much sugar and not enough sleep. Liam stayed near the door, unsure of the protocol. "How was yours?" "Lonely, exactly as expected." Victoria moved to her desk, but didn't sit. "I spent most of it trying to work and failing because I kept thinking about what you said, about maybe needing to change things." And I don't know how. I've been running this company, running my life the same way for so long that I don't know what different looks like. She met his eyes. "I was hoping you could help with that." "I'm not a life coach, Victoria. I'm barely managing my own mess." "I'm not asking for coaching. I'm asking for honesty, for someone who'll tell me when I'm being ridiculous, or working too hard, or making choices out of fear instead of what I actually want." "That sounds like friendship." "Is that what this is?" Victoria asked, and there was genuine uncertainty in her voice. "I don't have a reference point. I don't know what we're doing here." Liam thought about lying, about playing it safe and professional, but they'd gone past that somewhere between midnight and Christmas morning. "I think it could be," he said carefully. "Friendship. If we can figure out how to navigate the fact that you're my boss, and there are about 17 different power dynamics at play." "I've been thinking about that. The power dynamics." Victoria pulled out her phone, pulled up what looked like a job posting. "There's an opening in engineering, senior position. It's been sitting empty for 2 months because we can't find the right fit. You'd be qualified, overqualified, actually." Liam stared at the posting, his brain struggling to process. "You want me to transfer?" "I want you to do what's right for you. If you stay as my assistant, we both know things will be complicated. But if you move to a different department, different reporting structure, then we're just colleagues. The power dynamic disappears." "I can't take that job. I've been out of engineering for 3 years. My skills are outdated. I'd be competing against people who never left the field." "You'd be competing against people who don't have your work ethic or your ability to see things from multiple angles. I've watched you solve problems for 18 months. The way you troubleshoot technology issues, the way you think through logistics, you're wasted managing my calendar." "I make good money managing your calendar. Money I need for Sophie." "The engineering position pays 40% more. Better benefits too. And the hours are actually reasonable. No expectation of 60-hour weeks." Victoria set down her phone. "I'm not trying to get rid of you. I'm trying to give you options. If you want to stay where you are, that's fine. But if you've been staying because you think you don't have choices, I'm telling you that you do." Liam picked up the phone, read through the posting properly. Senior Engineering Analyst. The job description could have been written for him 3 years ago, before Rachel got sick, before he'd given up everything to be present for the end. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. "Because you told me I should stop making decisions based on fear and start making them based on what I actually want. And what I want is for you to have the career you're capable of having. What I want is to know that offering you that won't destroy whatever this is between us." "What is this? Really?" Victoria was quiet for a moment, and Liam watched her struggle with the answer. "I don't know, but it feels important. It feels like maybe if I'd had this kind of honesty with someone years ago, I wouldn't have ended up so alone. And I don't want to lose it just because I'm too scared to change the parameters." "So you're offering me a promotion to preserve a friendship that might not even work?" "Yes. Probably stupid. Definitely risky. But staying the same feels worse." Liam set down the phone. "I need to think about it. Talk to my sister. Make sure I'm not making a decision based on emotion instead of what's actually best for Sophie." Of course, take your time. The position isn't going anywhere. Victoria finally sat down and Liam saw her shoulders drop slightly. I filed the police report about Christmas Eve. Edward insisted, and he was right. They can't do much without more information, but at least there's documentation if something else happens. Do you think something else will happen? I don't know. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe I'll never know. She looked up at him. But I'm glad I had somewhere to go that night, someone to go to, even if I shouldn't have imposed. You didn't impose. You showed up scared, and I let you in. That's what people do. Not in my world. In my world, showing up scared means showing weakness, and weakness gets exploited. Then maybe you need a different world. Victoria smiled, sad and small. Maybe I do. The conversation ended there, Liam returning to his desk with more questions than answers. The job posting sat in his email inbox, a possibility he hadn't allowed himself to consider in 3 years. Could he really go back? Step into that part of his life he'd thought was permanently closed? His phone buzzed. Sarah. How's the first day back? She asked. Weird. Victoria offered me an engineering job. Victoria? Your boss, Victoria? The one you've worked for over a year and barely spoken to? It's complicated. I'll explain later. You better. This sounds like a story. It was a story. One he wasn't sure how to tell because he wasn't sure how it ended. He spent the rest of the morning working through Victoria's calendar, scheduling meetings, and managing the logistics of her life like he had for 18 months. But it felt different now. He knew what was behind the polished exterior, the vulnerability she hid behind corporate efficiency. At lunch, Victoria emerged from her office and stopped at his desk. There's a place down the street. Good sandwiches. Want to join me? The old Liam would have made an excuse, would have eaten at his desk to maximize productivity and minimize complications. But something had shifted, some permission granted over Christmas to be more than just functional. Yeah, okay. They walked side by side through the mostly empty office, taking the elevator down in silence. The sandwich shop was quiet, most people still on holiday break. They ordered, found a table in the corner, and for a moment neither knew what to say. This is strange, Victoria said finally. Very. But not bad strange. No, just different. Liam unwrapped his sandwich. Are people going to talk? About us having lunch? Probably. But I've stopped caring what people say. Part of my New Year's resolution. Stop living for other people's approval. It's not New Year's yet. I'm getting a head start. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes, and Liam found himself studying Victoria. In the office, surrounded by employees and the trappings of power, she looked more like the CEO he'd always known. But there were small differences. The way she held herself was slightly less rigid. The way she looked at him was more direct, less filtered through professional distance. I talked to Sarah, Victoria said abruptly. Your college friend, the one I missed the wedding for. Liam set down his sandwich. And I apologized. 20 years late, but I apologized. Told her I'd made the wrong choice, that I'd prioritized my career over our friendship, and I regretted it. Victoria picked at her own food. She was surprised to hear from me. We talked for an hour. It was nice. Awkward, but nice. What made you call her? You. What you said about making different choices. I realized I've been carrying guilt about Sarah for 2 decades, but never actually doing anything about it. So I did something. How did it end? She invited me to dinner next month. Her family, her husband, her kids. Just casual, normal. The kind of thing friends do. Victoria looked almost bewildered. I don't know how to do casual. You'll figure it out. Show up. Be honest. Don't try to optimize it. Not trying to optimize goes against every instinct I have. Then it'll be good practice. Victoria smiled, and it reached her eyes. You're good at this. At cutting through the noise and saying the thing that needs saying. Rachel used to say the same thing, usually right before telling me I was being too blunt. There's no such thing as too blunt, just people who can't handle honesty. They finished lunch and walked back to the office, the afternoon already dimming into early winter darkness. At Victoria's floor, she paused before getting off the elevator. Thank you, she said. For lunch, for everything. You already thanked me. I'll probably keep thanking you. I'm not good at accepting help without acknowledging it repeatedly. That's going to get old fast. Probably. The elevator doors started to close and Victoria held them. Liam? I meant what I said. About the job. About wanting you to have choices. Whatever you decide, we'll figure out the rest. The doors closed, and Liam rode back down to his floor, his mind spinning. The rest of the day passed in a blur of emails and scheduling, the routine of work providing a familiar framework while everything underneath was shifting. He picked up Sophie at 5:30, listened to her chatter about her day, made dinner that she picked at while telling him elaborate stories about the imaginary adventures her dinosaurs were having. Normal life. Predictable life. The kind of stability he'd built carefully over 3 years. But underneath, questions churned. Could he really go back to engineering? Would he be any good at it? What if he failed? What if he succeeded and it changed everything? After Sophie was asleep, Liam pulled out his laptop and looked at the job posting properly. Read through the requirements, the responsibilities, the scope. It was intimidating. It was also exciting in a way he'd forgotten work could be. The idea of solving real problems instead of just managing schedules, of using his brain for something more than logistics and calendar Tetris. His phone rang. Victoria. It's late, he answered. I know, I'm sorry. I wanted to say something and I couldn't wait until tomorrow. Her voice was uncertain. I shouldn't have offered you that job. It was manipulative. I told myself I was giving you options, but really I was trying to fix the power dynamic so I could keep you in my life without feeling guilty about it. Victoria, let me finish, please. She took a breath. You're right that I'm always calculating, always trying to control outcomes. And what I did today was exactly that. I dangled a better job in front of you like it was some kind of gift, when really it was self-serving. And I'm sorry. You don't owe me anything. Not friendship, not honesty, not your career choices. I had no right. Are you done? Yes. Okay? Now listen to me. You offered me a job I'm qualified for that pays significantly more than what I'm making now. That's not manipulation. That's opportunity. Whether or not I take it has nothing to do with owing you anything and everything to do with what's best for me and Sophie. But nothing. Stop apologizing for doing something kind just because it also benefits you. People can want things for multiple reasons. It doesn't make the gesture less real. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. I'm not used to people calling me on my bullshit. Then you've been surrounded by the wrong people. Apparently. I'm going to think about the job. Really think about it. Talk to my sister. Maybe talk to someone in HR about what the transition would look like. And then I'll make a decision based on what makes sense for my life. Not on what you want or what I think I owe you. Okay? Okay? Good. Now go to sleep. It's almost midnight, and I guarantee you've been working since you got home. How did you know? Because I know you. You're sitting at your kitchen table with your laptop and approximately 3 different reports open, and you're trying to convince yourself you're being productive when really you're avoiding going to bed because that's when the silence gets too loud. Silence on the other end. Then quietly, you're right. I know, close the laptop, go to bed. The reports will still be there tomorrow. Bossy? Someone has to be. He heard her laugh, soft and tired. Good night, Liam. Good night, Victoria. He hung up and sat in the quiet of his living room, feeling something shift inside his chest. This strange, unlikely connection that had started with fear and midnight had become something he couldn't quite name. Not romance. Neither of them was ready for that, might never be ready. But something important nonetheless. Something that made the silence less oppressive and the future less predetermined. The next morning, Liam called HR and asked about the engineering position. By afternoon, he had an interview scheduled for the following week. By evening, he'd told Sarah, who'd alternated between excitement and concern in equal measure. Are you sure about this? She asked. Going back to engineering, taking a risk. No, but I'm sure about staying where I am being the wrong choice, so I'm choosing the uncertainty. Very philosophical for someone who usually just wants the safe option. Maybe I'm tired of safe. Maybe safe is just another word for slowly dying. Okay, now you're being dramatic. Maybe, but I'm doing it anyway. The interview was Wednesday of the following week. Liam wore his old suit, slightly tight in the shoulders but still presentable, and tried not to think about how long it had been since he'd talked about load calculations and structural integrity. The panel consisted of 3 engineers and 1 HR representative, none of whom seemed to know or care that he was Victoria's assistant. They asked technical questions, asked about gaps in his knowledge, asked him to work through a problem on the whiteboard. And something in Liam woke up that had been dormant for 3 years. His hands remembered the equations. His mind remembered the logic. It was like speaking a language he'd thought he'd forgotten, but that came flooding back as soon as he opened his mouth. "We'll be in touch," they said at the end, and Liam had no idea if he'd done well or bombed completely. He returned to his desk to find Victoria waiting with coffee. "How did it go?" she asked, and there was genuine nervousness in her voice. "I don't know. Either really well or really badly. Hard to tell." "Did you remember how to engineer?" "Most of it. Some of it came back faster than I expected. Some of it felt like trying to read a book in a language I only half remembered." "That's good. That means you're being challenged. If it felt easy, the job would be wrong for you." "Did you pull strings to get me the interview?" "I mentioned that there was an internal candidate I thought they should consider, but the rest was you. I made sure of that." Victoria set down the coffee. "I didn't want you to get the job because of me. I wanted you to get it because you earned it." "What if I don't get it?" "Then we figure out plan B, but I think you will." She was right. The offer came Friday afternoon, better salary than Liam had dared hope for, benefits that would actually cover Sophie's medical needs without him constantly juggling deductibles, a start date 3 weeks out to allow for transition. Liam stared at the email for a full minute before it felt real. Then he called Victoria. "I got it," he said when she answered. "I know. HR called me for approval an hour ago. I've been waiting for you to call." Her voice was warm, genuinely happy. "Congratulations." "I'm terrified." "Good. That means it matters." "What if I fail? What if I can't do it anymore?" "Then you'll figure it out. You've rebuilt your entire life from nothing once already. You can do hard things. You just have to stop telling yourself you can't." Liam closed his eyes, let himself feel the fear and excitement in equal measure. "Thank you for pushing me, for seeing something I'd stopped seeing in myself. Thank you for showing up when I needed someone, for giving me permission to be scared and human and imperfect. We're quite a pair. Aren't we just?" They made plans to celebrate. Dinner, somewhere casual, just 2 friends acknowledging a good thing. But when Saturday came and they sat across from each other at a neighborhood restaurant Sophie had picked, Liam realized it was more than just celebration. It was proof that they'd found a way forward. Different from what either had expected, but real. "Sophie wants to meet you," Liam said over pasta that Sophie was deconstructing rather than eating. "She's been asking who I've been texting at night. I told her a friend from work." "Is that what I am? A friend from work?" "You tell me. What do we call this?" Victoria looked at Sophie, who was currently arranging rigatoni into patterns on her plate, then back at Liam. "I think friend works. I like friend." "Me too." Sophie looked up, tomato sauce on her chin. "Are you Daddy's friend?" "I am," Victoria said, and she said it like she meant it. "Do you like dinosaurs?" "I don't know much about them." Sophie's eyes went wide, like Victoria had just admitted to being from another planet. "I can teach you. I know everything about dinosaurs." "I would like that very much." And she would, Liam realized. This wasn't Victoria performing interest or being polite. She genuinely wanted to hear his 6-year-old daughter explain the difference between a pterodactyl and a pteranodon. Wanted to be part of this small, messy life. They finished dinner and walked through the neighborhood, Sophie running ahead, while the adults followed at a more reasonable pace. Snow had started falling, light and tentative, turning the city soft. "I have something to tell you," Victoria said. "I hired a COO, someone to handle day-to-day operations. It was Edward's suggestion. He said I needed to either delegate more or accept that I was going to work myself into an early grave. That's huge. It's terrifying. It means letting go of control. Trusting someone else to make decisions I've been making for years. But you were right. I can't keep doing everything. Something has to give." What are you going to do with all your free time? I don't know yet. Maybe actually take that trip I talked about. Maybe learn to cook something more complicated than scrambled eggs. Maybe just exist. Figure out who I am when I'm not the CEO every minute of every day. That's brave. That's terrifying, Victoria corrected. But I'm doing it anyway. They walked in silence for a while, watching Sophie chase snowflakes. When they reached Liam's building, Victoria stopped. I should go. Let you two have your evening. You could come up, if you want. We're just going to watch a movie. Nothing exciting. Victoria looked at the building, then at Liam, then at Sophie, who was now making a very small snowman on the corner planter. I'd like that, if you're sure. I'm sure. So Victoria came up, and they watched Frozen because Sophie insisted. And Victoria didn't complain even when Sophie made her sing along to Let It Go. And when the movie ended and Sophie was half asleep on the couch between them, Liam felt something settle in his chest that he'd thought was permanently broken. Not fixed, not healed, but less sharp, less raw. Like maybe there was room in his life for more than just survival and grief. Room for friendship and possibility, and the kind of honest connection he'd thought died with Rachel. Victoria left around 9, Sophie already in bed, the apartment quiet again but not empty in the way it used to be. At the door, she turned back. Thank you, she said, for letting me be part of this, part of your life. Thank you for showing up at my door on Christmas Eve, for being scared enough to ask for help. Best decision I've made in years. Same. She left, and Liam stood in his doorway for a moment, watching her disappear down the hallway. Then he closed the door and leaned against it, feeling the weight of the past weeks settle into something like understanding. His phone buzzed. Victoria. Made it to my car, not being followed. See you Monday. Liam smiled and typed back. See you Monday. As colleagues this time. As friends, she corrected. As friends, he agreed. 3 weeks later, Liam started his new position. The learning curve was steep. The work challenging in ways he'd forgotten work could be. But he was good at it. Better than he'd expected. His manager told him he had instincts that couldn't be taught, the kind of problem-solving ability that only came from real experience. Victoria hired her COO and started leaving work at reasonable hours. Started saying no to obligations that didn't serve her. Started building a life that looked less impressive on paper but felt more honest in practice. They had lunch most Thursdays, just two friends catching up, talking about work and life, and Sophie's latest dinosaur facts. Sometimes Victoria would text him late at night when the silence got too loud, and Liam would text back, keeping her company across the distance until she could sleep. It wasn't romance, it wasn't redemption, it was just two people who'd found each other at the exact moment they'd both needed someone to see them clearly. To say that being scared was okay, that being alone was a choice, not a sentence. That maybe the way forward wasn't back to who you used to be, but forward into someone new. 6 months after that Christmas Eve, Victoria came to Sophie's 7th birthday party at the park. She brought a book about paleontology that was way too advanced, but that Sophie treasured anyway. She stayed for the whole party, cake and chaos and all, and looked more comfortable than Liam had ever seen her. Thank you for coming, he said as the party was winding down. Thank you for inviting me. You're part of this now, part of our life. Couldn't imagine it without you. Victoria's eyes were bright. I couldn't imagine my life without you two either. Funny how that works. How one scared decision on Christmas Eve can change everything. Best scared decision you ever made. Second best. First was filing that police report. They caught the guy, by the way. Edward told me last week. It was one of those environmental protesters, but more extreme than most. Had a list of CEOs he was monitoring. I was third on the list. Jesus, are you okay? I'm fine. He's being charged, and I'm glad I trusted my instinct that night. Glad I didn't just dismiss it as paranoia. She looked at him seriously. If I hadn't been scared enough to leave the office when I did, who knows what might have happened. You ended up at my door. Best place I could have ended up. Sophie ran over, demanding they watch her do a cartwheel. They watched, applauded enthusiastically despite the cartwheel being mostly a sideways fall. Normal parent things. Normal friend things. The kind of ordinary moments that only felt ordinary until you'd lived without them long enough to understand their value. That evening, after Victoria had left and Sophie was in bed, Liam stood at his window looking out at the city. The same view he'd had on Christmas Eve when Victoria had knocked on his door. But everything felt different now. Less like survival, more like living, less like running out the clock, more like building something new from the pieces of what came before. His phone buzzed. Victoria, because of course it was. Thank you for today, for including me, for making me feel like I belong somewhere. Liam typed back. You do belong. With us. In this messy, imperfect life we're all figuring out together. Messy and imperfect sounds perfect. It's what we've got. It's more than enough. Liam set down his phone and looked around his apartment. Still small, still shabby in places, still filled with evidence of a life that hadn't gone according to plan, but also filled with possibility now, with connection, with the knowledge that you could be alone for a long time and still find your way back to being seen. The silence didn't press against his ears anymore. It just was. And that was okay. Because silence didn't mean isolation. Not anymore. It just meant peace. The kind of peace that came from knowing that when you needed someone, they'd answer. That when you were scared, you had somewhere to go. That being vulnerable wasn't weakness, but the only way forward into something real. Victoria had asked him once what he'd do if he could start over. He'd said something about building things with his hands, about tangible results. But the real answer, the one he was living now, was simpler than that. He'd choose connection over perfection, honesty over performance, the messy, complicated reality of showing up for people over the polished fiction of having it all together. He'd choose exactly this, the life he was living right now. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real. Because he'd stopped running from the grief and started building around it. Because one scared woman had knocked on his door on Christmas Eve and given them both permission to stop pretending they were fine. Some nights change everything. Some moments of vulnerability create connections that reshape your entire world. Some friendships save you in ways you didn't know you needed saving. This was one of those nights, one of those moments, one of those friendships. And standing in his living room, looking at the life he'd built from nothing, Liam finally understood what Rachel had tried to tell him in those last days. That love doesn't end when someone dies. It changes shape, becomes something you carry forward into new connections, new possibilities, new versions of yourself you didn't know existed. He'd carried her forward, into this moment, into this life, into the person he'd become who was capable of opening his door to someone else's fear and saying, "You're not alone. Neither of us has to be alone." That was enough. More than enough. It was everything. His phone buzzed one more time. Victoria. I meant what I said earlier. Best scared decision I ever made. Thank you for being the person I could be scared with. Liam smiled and typed back the truth. Thank you for choosing my door, for trusting me with your fear, for showing me that connection is still possible even when you think you've lost the capacity for it. We found it together. We did. Good night, friend. Good night, Victoria. He set down his phone and turned off the lights, leaving just the city glow through the windows. Tomorrow Sophie would wake up still high on birthday sugar and party excitement. Tomorrow he'd go to work and solve problems, and use his brain in ways that felt meaningful. Tomorrow Victoria would navigate her new role as someone who delegated instead of controlled, who built a life instead of just a career. Tomorrow would come with all its complications and uncertainties and messy imperfections. But tonight, standing in the quiet of his apartment, Liam felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Not happiness, exactly. Not healing, just presence. The ability to exist in this moment without constantly reaching for the past or fearing the future. To accept that this was his life now, different from what he'd planned, smaller in some ways and larger in others, but unmistakably his. And in the darkness, in the silence that was no longer suffocating, Liam let himself feel grateful. For the knock on the door. For the scared decision. For the friendship that grew from shared vulnerability. For the reminder that even in the depths of grief and isolation, connection was possible. Change was possible. Life, real life, was still possible. He'd spent 3 years surviving. Now, finally, he was ready to do more than that. To build something new. To let people in. To trust that being seen, really seen, was worth the risk of being hurt. Victoria had given him that. By showing up scared and refusing to pretend she was fine. By being vulnerable enough to ask for help. By proving that strength wasn't the absence of fear, but the willingness to face it with someone else. And in return, he'd given her permission to be human. to want things beyond professional success, to admit that lonely was worse than scared, to understand that sometimes the bravest thing you could do was knock on someone's door at midnight and say, "I need help." They'd saved each other, not in some grand, dramatic way, but in the small, honest way of two people choosing connection over isolation, choosing truth over performance, choosing to show up messy and imperfect and scared and trusting that would be enough. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything they'd both needed and hadn't known how to ask for. And sometimes, on quiet nights when the city hummed outside his window, Liam would think about that Christmas Eve knock and feel something like wonder, at how one moment could change everything, at how fear could lead to friendship, at how the worst night could become the beginning of something better. Not perfect, never perfect, but real, honest, true. And in the end, that was all anyone really needed. Someone who saw you clearly and chose to stay anyway. Someone who understood that life was messy and hard and often didn't make sense, but that showing up for each other made it bearable, made it worthwhile, made it something more than just surviving until the end. Liam had that now. Victoria had that. And together, they'd built something neither could have built alone. Not romance, not redemption. Just honest connection between two people who'd been alone too long and finally found their way back to being seen. That was the story. That was the ending. Not neat, not tied up with a bow, but true. And truth, messy as it was, turned out to be exactly what they'd both needed all along.